Gregory, what's up, man?
Hey, Fran, what's up?
You know it. Trying to brave this weather here. It was
Yeah.
a scary night last night, but thanks for coming on.
Yeah, man, it's good to see you again.
You too. You too. I miss you guys so much. So, for those of you that don't know Gregory, he's a fantastic artist, painter, and former next door neighbor of mine in Santa Monica, California. And he is the father-in-law to my dog Bolt, who is
Yes.
married to his dog Shanti. And they would cry for each other, man.
It's
It was the sweetest thing ever.
it's totally true.
Yeah,
Still, when I mention Bolt's name to her, she goes,
exactly. Yeah. So let's jump in, man.
"All
So
right."
you're originally from Miami, is that right?
Yeah, I was born in Miami, but I was raised in Texas.
Okay. And your grandfather was a painter, is that right?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
I grew up. I spent a lot of time with my grandparents growing up. I think it was a '60s thing. It's
Mm.
pretty common for people in there born in the '60s, but yeah, and he was a career painter. He had a portrait studio on Miami Beach. His claims to fame was he knew Frank Sinatra pretty well. He ran in that circle, and he did a pretty famous portrait of Sinatra, and then he did one of JFK that's actually hanging in the White House. Although it may not be hanging anymore, to be true, but
Yeah.
but yeah. So growing up like that in his studio and in his shop, like he had a retail shop on Miami Beach. I just never really questioned whether what I was going to be or whether it was even an option for me or an option for anybody. I just never questioned it. He was a professional artist, and I had the talent, so I just knew that's what I would be.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Like how old were you and you figured out like, okay, I've got the skill to do this and the flair and the eye and everything else?
I mean, it sounds cliche, but it's really like this is really the truth. Ever since I could grip a pencil, I could do it,
Oh wow.
and and do it at a really, really high level. Um, I was just really good at it really young, and so there was just never a question. Like it's just in me. It's so strange because my siblings are not that way. Um, I have two brothers and a sister, and they don't have that talent. So I think it's really kind of a miraculous thing.
That is so cool. For me, I can take a picture, great composition, lighting, or whatever. But as far as drawing, I remember Zach, my son, at an early age, was like, "We draw an elephant or a dog or whatever," and it'd be a stick figure because I can't do it. And he'd be so pissed off at me. That is not a dog. That is not an elephant. What are you doing? So
Dad.
yeah, exactly. Yeah. So to look at your stuff, to me, it's mind blowing. When I found out that you're an artist, I think I approached you like right away. I'm like, do you do commission paintings? And you're like, yes, I do. And one of the first, I have many of your pieces throughout my new home I just purchased here in Edmond, Oklahoma. But my entire living room, my hallway is littered with your artwork. And anybody that comes over here is just mind blown, you know?
Yeah, you're a big collector of mine, and
Yeah.
I really appreciate that. But the thing about it, and I really like to take this approach actually with as many collectors as I can. Obviously, my work sold through a lot of different places and outlets, so I can't always do this. But one of the most important and cherished things about that experience to me, the collector experience, is that I like to connect with my collectors, and I think that we all kind of like we're all kind of, even if they're female, we're all kind of bros,
Right.
like we all have similar interests. One crazy thing about like almost all my collectors are creative in some way.
Oh,
And you're
interesting.
I mean, you're like wildly creative with your documentaries and your podcast and your photography and stuff. And like when we did a big commission for you, it was the 5 people you'd like to have dinner with, like that experience, like we collaborated on that. Like that wasn't me telling you this is the painting. It was like, okay, let's work on what this is and what it's going to be and what's important to you.
Right.
And it was like a totally collaborative experience. So, that's just something that I really like. And that actually happens too, even when it's not a commission. It's just like a shared interest. The pieces you have are all things I'm interested in as well.
Right.
I'm just not passively painting these things.
Yeah. So I'd like to go ahead and pop up this image. My first one I did commission off of you. That was a pure off the top. I just think I sent you a photo.
Yeah.
Of my favorite band, and anybody that watches this podcast is going to know, is Judas Priest.
Yeah.
And to me, Rob Halford is the greatest vocalist that ever lived. And I'm highly inspired by music, art, and anything else. I like to play some of this stuff, where I'm just, if I'm feeling unmotivated or uninspired, just sit there and look at it and study it for a minute. And all of a sudden, man, it'll spark something in me. And I'm like, okay, here we go. So here's the Rob Halford image. And can you describe what this medium is that you use for this?
Yeah, absolutely. So a little bit of background, I was a big metal fan when I was a kid too, and into my early 20s. And so again, like I was just saying a minute ago, I can totally relate to what you're talking about. And I'm probably not as big a fan as you are, because you're like the biggest Priest fan I know. However, I am a fan. I know the music very well, and I do listen to it and like it. So that's our connection. And I just love music, and mainly rock music in general. So it's we can connect on that level. This piece, it's an interesting technique, because this is soft pastel done on black velour paper. And what that means is that the paper has a velvet texture to it. It's a German paper called Hahnemühle. And, back to my grandfather, he was always doing these portraits in pastel, and I could remember that it had a soft, furry paper. That's all I could remember about it. And I was speaking to another artist about it, and he goes, bro, they still have that. It's still around. You can get it from Germany. It's called Hahnemühle. So I got the same paper my grandfather was using. And it's really interesting, because the way it's made specifically for soft pastel, but you cannot make a harsh mark with it. So everything is done. It can take endless layers, but none of it is harsh. It's all soft. So you just start layering colors in and going over it, and you can tell by looking at it. It has that kind of glow to it.
Yep.
And that's something that's just inherent to the color choices, but also like the medium of pastel.
Right.
So yeah.
So when I sent you the picture, and then you see this black, like velour paper you're talking about, did you already envision it in your head, or is it like me when I'm editing something? It's a blank canvas, and as you're going through your edit, that's where the real creativity comes in.
Yeah, I think that's true. I mean, I don't go through a lot of planning on these. I try to let some of my instinct come through. To get the accuracy of the likeness, I do a technique. I don't know if other people do this or not, but I'll draw it lightly through and get it kind of blocked out of how, I'll obviously working from reference, from a photograph, to get the likeness. But like, I remember that this photograph didn't have a lot of detail, and it was a rather flat photograph.
Right.
Especially like in his mouth area, there was a lot of brightness. It was just a bad reproduction. And I don't think we could find any good ones. But so, I play with the amount of light and dark to kind of get some drama to it. And I have to kind of like create some of the detail that's not really there. Yeah, and then the technique I use to refine it is I just get it down lightly, and then I take a picture of it with my phone, and I go into Photoshop and make sure it's the exact same size and make sure it's perfectly, rectangular on all edges, and then lay it over the photograph itself and see, if I've lined things up correctly and if the proportions are correct and stuff. And I mean, in this case, it was all about the mouth.
Right.
Like the glasses aren't hard. It's not hard to do, but the mouth had to be just right on this.
Yeah, and he's got that snarl,
That snarl, yeah, it's all about
cool.
that.
It's so cool. Yeah. So now it's proudly hanging in my hallway in the living room. So it's the first thing somebody sees when they walk in the front door is, that one, the influencer, then the Alice Cooper, which we'll show in a few minutes. Yeah. So another thing you taught me about was framing, and I love it. You can see the shadow around the paper there, right?
Yeah, around the edges.
What is that technique called, and how do they do that?
Yeah, so that's something. I mean, I'm a collector as well. So all the art in my home is stuff I've collected, and I've learned over time that with prints and works on paper, that there's this technique called float framing that you can ask for at the framer. And what they do is they create a little raised area, but it's inside the edges of the artwork behind. And so it just lifts the print or whatever the art that you have off of the back surface. A lot of people do like a mat, and you can't do a float frame with a mat because it's flat.
Right.
The mat is hiding the edges. So this is kind of the opposite of a mat. It's like a non-traditional way, but it just gives it I love the dimension, and it just makes it feel a lot more special.
And a lot more expensive. Not that it is expensive, it just makes it look more expensive.
It does. Yeah, like, it really does.
How did they achieve that effect? So I know you said you grew up in Texas, but eventually you moved to New York, right?
Yeah. So spent a lot of time in Texas. Got into my, raised some kids. I was working in advertising there. I think I told you at the time, but I was always still painting, but it wasn't a career yet. And I'd always wanted to live in New York. I'd traveled there as a kid. It's a funny story. Me and my girlfriend, when I was 16, we lied to our parents and told them that we were going to, friend's house for the weekend. And we jumped on a plane from Dallas and flew to New York City. This was in the 80s.
Oh my gosh.
We stayed in the Chelsea Hotel.
That's wild.
I cannot believe we did that, and I cannot believe we did it safely. Like, New York in the 80s was a very different place than it is now.
Yeah. So when you moved there, what kind of environmental impact did that have on your artwork? Any at all, or slightly?
New York's a tough place for artists. You wouldn't think that, but it really is. It's just not inclusive, and it's basically a lot of no. And I think that is because there's an attitude there, pervasive attitude in general, that you can't have this, like, this is unreachable for you. But I also think it has to do with the amount of artists, like the sheer volume of how many are there. And so naturally, not everybody's going to make it. So to answer your question specifically, because it's that type of place and because it's so expensive, it took me a while to find a studio and kind of get my roots there.
Right.
And my studio is extremely tiny with no windows. So at the time, I naturally had to work smaller. So it definitely had that effect on me. And I was working at the time in oil pastels, which, as opposed to the Rob Halford piece, oil pastels are like oil paint in a stick that you can draw with.
Oh, interesting.
Culturally and geographically, it did not affect my work. but I was undergoing kind of a renaissance then in terms of how I was working, because I'm pushing myself to work a little more freely. Because in the past and all through most of my through, you know, when I was in school and my time in Dallas, I was really obsessed with photorealism, which is a art technique where photos are copied verbatim. So you really can't even tell the difference between a painting and a photograph. But over time, that began to it began to be, it's just easy. And what I mean by that is, like, if you take a photograph as an artist, and you want to copy it, you have that photograph as a roadmap. You can follow it. Whoever you are, you can follow it. You can do it, Fran. You may not do it exactly photographic, but you have a roadmap to follow. This eye goes here, this nose is this proportion, and it goes here, and you can see.
Right.
I became interested in no roadmap. I don't want reference now in my work. It's important sometimes in, like, when we're doing commission paintings of specific people. But as you can see with that Rob Halford, I pushed beyond what the photograph actually looks like by adding in these colors, which were not there. By the way, our reference for this was a black and white photograph.
Yeah.
So, you know, all of the colors are me creating that and designing that. And then, you know, like I said, like doing the mouth when there wasn't really that much there to see. So this is what I'm talking about when I'm talking about going off the map, going off the road. And so I think in New York, whether New York affected it or not, I'm not really sure. But at that time when I was there, we were there for 12 years. I was pushing beyond, you know, to go beyond reference.
Yeah, totally. And then making the move to Los Angeles, Santa Monica area, how did that affect everything? Because I mean, New York, if you can make it there, you can make it anywhere. LA is a place, to me, just as hard, because this is where the best in the world come. Best filmmakers, editors, writers, painters, authors. Any kind of challenges that you had that you faced, or to come easier for you?
Well, the way it happened was the pandemic knocked us out of New York. And we weren't able to stay. And I was doing some work at the time in the Midwest, and my partner Kathy was in New York with Shanti, your beloved Shanti.
Yes.
And it just became really dangerous in New York. Dangerous to be there. Really bad place to be for the pandemic. So Kathy jumped on a plane with Shanti and came to the Midwest, and we just rode. We were in a small town in the Midwest. We were lucky to be there, and we were able to ride out the pandemic in a really comfortable way, because there's just not that many people in the town we were in. So it was very different. The restrictions were different. But when the pandemic was over, we both had decided, you know, we're clearly not staying in the Midwest. And we kind of had this feeling that New York was over for us. So my partner, Kathy, well, actually, the story is that we had a show in Ventura, and we came out for the show. So Ventura is north of Los Angeles, but we stayed in Santa Monica. And I always had a connection with Santa Monica, because I had done work here in the past over the years I was in Dallas. And once we came here, I went back to the Midwest after the show, and Kathy, she's like, would you be okay if I stayed? So she stayed in an Airbnb for a couple of months because she wanted to be near the ocean. And one thing led to another, and we just ended up agreeing that this would be the place we would move. So we did that. And I think, you know, obviously LA and New York are very different, as you know, as you mentioned. But I think the one thing about Los Angeles is that it's way more inclusive creatively. And I think people in general, I wouldn't say people are nicer, because I don't think people are not nice in New York, but I just think that the attitude in terms of is a lot more open. So, you know, I don't take a lot of, because I work in portraiture primarily, and I'm painting people, There's not a lot that makes it into my work. There are a few pieces. I have a piece. I don't think you have a picture of it, but I have one piece that has a Lakers jersey in it. So that was that was definitely influenced by Los Angeles. And then I have another one of like a tatted up Vato, where I painted all the tattoos and stuff. And that, that definitely was influenced by being out here. So maybe the people influence it more than the environment. But yeah, LA is a lot better place, a lot sunnier, and a lot more positive place to be for an artist, I would say.
Oh, definitely. Yeah. There's aspects of it I really miss. What I don't miss is the traffic. The insane cost of living it's just crazy. When I moved out here, it was just mind boggling and how inexpensive it was.
Yeah.
And nice,
Yeah.
It's definitely a conservative state where I live, but in my community in Edmond, I was very surprised at how liberal it was. A lot of anti-Trump, right?
Yeah.
Which was for me refreshing.
It's a good thing. Yeah.
It is to me. It's a good thing. Yeah.
Yep.
So you described your work as like an inside out portraiture, right?
Yep.
So you like to really reveal the inner personality of your drawing rather than just the exterior look of it. Explain that concept to me.
Yeah, you've nailed it. I mean, that is the essence of what I'm trying to do. I really am trying to reinvent portraiture in any way I can from tradition, to kind of move away from what people think of as a traditional portraiture. Not that that's a bad, not that traditional portraiture is bad, but my interest lies in, if I'm going to make a portrait of you, I want it to be innately Fran. And I don't want it to be what Fran looks like. I want it to be what Fran is, what the essence of Fran is. I want it to reflect, your interests, your personality, and what really makes you tick. So I think, when I'm making a portrait, I'm interested in those layers. And I think that's the essence of an inside out, what I mean when I say an inside out portrait.
Oh, that's cool. So in other words, my portrait will look like a schizophrenic on Thorazine, handcuffed to a wall.
Yes. Very disturbed
That's
individual.
Yeah. So oil pastels play a big part in your work, right? And to me, it's just so vibrant, man. It's like watching an old Technicolor movie, right? The colors just pop.
Yep.
Is that why you chose that medium?
Well,
Mostly that you work with anyway.
Yeah, I guess I'm more traditional in some ways with oil. I think oil is a very, very traditional medium. It's very expensive. It's very labor intensive. The pastels are extremely expensive. They're like $7 a stick, and they're like this long. They're French.
Oh my gosh.
And they crumble when you touch them, so they fall apart. So it's for some reason I gravitate to those more traditional materials for my non-traditional work, and I'm not really sure why. I think it's just how the materials work in the process. There's something to the process of it that's alluring to me. It sure is a pain in the ass. I got to tell you, like the solvents and stuff, they've manufactured them now so that they don't smell, but it's almost more dangerous that they don't smell because you can't tell, what you're breathing every day and stuff. And the cleanup is, the cleanup every day with the brushes and stuff is really intense. But there's something about it, like the other option would be acrylic paints or spray paints. And there's something about those that just don't resonate with me for whatever reason. So yeah, I think it's, I think with each artist, it's a choice, and you go through experimenting with materials and different ways of doing things, and you land on a way that resonates with you. But I think just as importantly, accomplishes the outcome that you're after.
Right. I was lucky enough to come to one of your big exhibitions in Santa Monica, one of the galleries. and I saw how much work went into it. It was a lot of work
Yeah.
gathering all those pieces, getting everything framed and put up on the walls or whatnot. And then I was there for the grand, I guess, opening night or whatnot, and it was packed. Um, what kind of nerves do you have exposing new artwork out there? Because I remember when, I screened Hired Gun for the first time, I was terrified,
Yeah.
because you don't know what the crowd's reaction is going to be.
Yeah.
And then once you see that crowd reaction, and it was a positive one, thank God, I was so relieved, and then you start taking your artwork and my movie around the globe or different states or countries or whatnot, and you hope you get that same reaction. And lucky for me, I did. How does that make you feel internally?
Yeah, I mean, it's really scary, like you said, but it's also really gratifying because so much, like you said, so much work. I think that show had, I think there were around 30 pieces that had to be framed and stretched, and it was months and months of work and prep and doing interviews and all of these different things that I'm sure you did the same thing for your movie. And always when you're saying that, I mean, I think you make like a really, really insightful, good point, because it makes me think of David Lynch, and it makes me think of different filmmakers who you hear these stories of when they first screened the movie, to the people who paid for it,
Right.
to the studio. And Kubrick was the same way. And those guys were just belligerent. They're like, if you don't like it, fuck you, like this is the film I made, love it or leave it. So I think like there has to be a little, like I try to have as much of that as possible, like to
Right.
believe in my vision and my work enough that like, you should own this,
It's funny because Francis Ford Coppola got the Razzie Award or whatever for his movie Megalopolis, which was a giant flop, right?
Right.
By the studio terms, money wise.
Yeah.
But he took that with reverence. He's like, I accept this. Fuck everybody that's conforming to whatever, make the art you want to make.
Yes.
And then you win.
Yes.
Right.
Yes. Yes. And I think like just as it is, exactly, and just as it is with film, so much is so much weight is put on sales, figures. But if you're really an artist, you're not really concerned about that. You're just making what you feel compelled to make.
Right.
It's an unexplainable thing. I never lack for inspiration. I always know what the next, like, 3 or 4 bodies of work ahead. I know what I already have the inspiration for what I'm about to do, and I can't explain where it comes from. I just follow it. And I think it's similar with you. Like when you and I talk about your projects that are coming up or things you'd like to do, this is an instinct that you have. It's something you're interested in, and that you want to show other people. And I think like my work's the same way. Like when you look at my work, I'm showing you something that I think is really cool, and that I really like. I'm not making this so that you'll buy it,
Right.
In general. And so I think there's a lot of parallels there.
Right. It's funny. I collect your artwork, and I've collected some others as well. Jason Newsted from Metallica, when he quit Metallica, he went into painting.
Yeah.
And I acquired a few pieces off of him. I'd lived in the North Bands, like near San Francisco, and my apartment had no artwork. So I just took a little video of my apartment and I sent it to him via text. I'm like, dude, my walls need your artwork, And he texted me right back. He's like, why don't you and Zach, my son, come over on Saturday and pillage through some of my stuff and see if everything jumps out at you. So I did. And his stuff is super abstract, all kinds of mediums. I mean, he'll throw glitter on it, watercolors, oil, pastel, just anything, right?
Yep.
And I think he's the same. He just goes, does what he wants to do, whether anybody likes it or not. And he sold some big pieces, you know, and I acquired 5 from him. And I'm having a really difficult time. I think I sent you the screenshot of the one photo, just getting it framed where
Yeah.
I'm happy with it. You know, I'm
Yes.
happy with the painting, but the framing is just such a pain in the ass sometimes, because you envision what it's going to look like when the framer hands it to you. You're like, yeah, this isn't working, you know. So I've
Yeah.
taken it back twice now. But anyway, so you often work on multiple pieces at the same time?
Yeah.
Yeah.
If you were to go into my studio right now, I would say there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I think there's 8 or 9 pieces in progress.
Wow.
Yeah, maybe more actually, because there's a few pieces over on the tables. But yeah, I don't know. Maybe it's a ADD or something. I'm not really sure what that is, but well, actually, one truth to it is in the process, because most people probably don't know this, but oils don't dry. They take a long time to dry, like weeks. So if you're working on something you're layering, which in most cases you are, you can't just go back to the next day and paint over it, because it's wet still. So so that's part of it, is that I can't just like not go back to the studio for a couple of weeks while I wait for something to dry. So that's part of it. But the other is like I just got to keep myself interested and keep myself moving. And it's gonna be crazy when I die, because there's gonna be like some fucking like airplane hangar full of like 10,000 paintings that,
Yeah.
you
You know,
know.
it's funny you say that, because Jason Newsted, you know, when he lived in was it Mountain, not Mountain View, somewhere in Northern California. You know, he only lived like 30 minutes away from me. So I'd go over there. You know, we worked together for about a year and a half or so on one of his records. But he had his house that he lived in. Then on that property, he had a recording studio jam room called the Chop House, where he
Yeah.
would invite all his friends to come jam. And then he bought the house next to that, and it was called the Slop Room, and that's where he would paint. And I'm telling you, all 4 bedrooms from front to back were just hundreds and hundreds of paintings, you know. And
Yeah.
do you have a storage place where you put all your extra stuff that is?
Well, I did, but I just got a bigger studio last year that has a storage facility inside of it, in the back, and I had some custom shelves made and stuff so that I could even store things up higher.
Oh,
So
cool.
I've been able to get around that and save some cost on that. But
Right.
yeah, I mean, I would love to be in the position Jason's in, because yeah, exactly that. Like, I see recently I've gotten a little bit obsessed with Joshua Tree. I see myself out there with an inexpensive home that has a, detached studio or garage or whatever that has all that. Like I can see that.
Right. Right.
That would be ideal.
So I'm going to flash this image up here. This is another one I acquired from you. It's not it's a print of an original photo you did.
Yeah. You know what I think of when I see this? One of the things that I've discovered over time about my work is that most of it, and I actually think that Halford portrait in some ways is the same. All of it is collage.
Mm.
And so collage traditionally is what is it? Cutting things up and putting them together, right?
Yep.
But this is that, but it's not cut up. It's painted in different sections, but it really is collage, because what I did is I remember working on this, and I think I took 6 or 7 different Andy Warhol reference photographs, and kind of worked on patching them together to where they told kind of a story of him and his complexity and his life. from different stages, and combine them all together. And I mean, that's the essence of an inside out portrait in my mind.
Right. Oh,
I mean,
yeah.
there was the original painting of this sold, but you have a print of it. But there's also a piece, I don't know if I've shown it to you, that I did of Bowie.
I have seen it. Yeah.
And it's like, it's similar to Warhol. Like, if you think of Bowie and all the different personas he had over time, what an interesting person. You can't just paint Bowie from one stage. That's not Bowie,
Right.
and I think it's true of Warhol too, of all the different phases he went through, and he had different hair, different looks, different things. That's really the essence of a person, right? It's
It
not
is.
we're not just one thing. Like you're not just one thing. You're also like a serial killer, and you're
Right.
but
Let's move to this image here, because this one blew my mind. This was the gift that you gave me. I was getting ready to go walk Bolt, my dog, who absolutely loves you and your family. And you're like, hang on one second, I got something I want to get you. And you ran back upstairs and presented me with this.
there he is.
I mean, that is identical to what my dog looks like. So was this a picture you took at your house when he was staying with you one trip, or?
Yep, that's on our bed actually. And this one goes against everything I just talked about, because it's not a collage in any
Right.
way, and it's also like leaning back on my photorealistic side. But I think what comes through in this is my passion for the subject. Like, you can feel how much I care about this little guy in this.
Yeah.
And I can't explain how that comes through, but I think some of it's the choice of the way it's painted, but also I think some of it is the choice of the reference photo, too. So I think that's the beauty of painting and of art, is that, an artist can express these things. And I don't know how. It's a miracle. Right. It's magic.
Right. Let me pull this one up too. This is another print that I acquired from you that's hanging in the hallway that's across from my main big main wall where a bunch of the pictures are. This one I really love. What do you call this series?
So this is this is a series called Abstract Heads. Mm-hmm. And I think there's around 30 drawings and paintings that are done this way with different subjects. And the idea of this, like I said earlier, like, I'm very interested in pushing the boundaries of portraiture and exploring different ways to do this. And the way that this came about is I was looking through a sketchbook for something completely unrelated and came across this sketch I did when I was in New York on the subway. And it's just a very, very simple, like, black and white line drawing of like a torso with a tie, like a man's torso. And then I just went like this. And then I drew a little ball cap on top of it. And I was like, that's how I'm feeling today. That's me. I'm just like, there's a million images and words and things flashing through like a movie screen through our lives, right? Like, just constantly, like right now I'm having thousands of thoughts. You are too. It's insane. And then you add the media, you add social media, you add all of this. A creative person, and most people in general, are just overwhelmed by these things. So that's really what these paintings are about. It's people and our commonality in our confusion, dysfunction, and our overwhelmed lives.
Right.
An asterisk to that is that I also had always wanted in my mind to combine abstract painting and figurative painting together, but I could never figure out a way to do it. And when I saw that little sketch, that serendipitous little sketch in my sketchbook, I was like, holy fuck, that's how I can do it. And the concept behind it really fits. So, you know, I did those 30 or so drawings and paintings, and there's actually even one sculpture that's done in that realm.
I
So
saw that. That's really, really cool.
it is cool, and I've moved on from doing these paintings because I kind of exhausted the concept, but I did a lot of them.
Yeah, yeah. Do you ever, like, for me, if I don't like editing my content or movies or whatnot, but sometimes you're forced that hand. And
Yeah,
I don't know. I don't think I have crazy ADD, but it's like sometimes I'll just get so distracted, I just have to walk away.
yeah.
Or when you're working on one of these pieces for so long, does it ever just look like white noise and you're just kind of like, what the fuck am I going to do with this thing now? I've spent so much time, I can't leave it here. What, you ever run into one of those brick walls?
Yeah, I think it's less brick walls, and I think it's more problems that I create for myself with technique or with the paint or with stuff that you have to solve the problems.
Mm.
I'm working on a piece right now that's completely out of focus.
Oh, wow.
It's a portrait that's soft, like
Like a
and
gauze and blur type thing.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Like it's a collab piece I'm doing with another artist for a show we're going to do, and it's a woman standing in front of a painting, and the painting's on a wall in a gallery, and the painting is in focus, but she's closer to the quote unquote camera. There's no camera, but she's closer to us, so she would be soft. And I think I really struggled at first with how to paint soft like that. Like everything I paint is in focus, so
Right.
it was. I use that as an example because it's just a series of like mistakes and different things that you just have to work your way out of. I'm sure it's similar in editing that,
Mm.
you know, what you have in your mind as a way to solve this might not be the way that you get there, and you have to work your way through. So
Yep.
there's definitely a lot of that. And I think also like what you were saying with the ADD, I mean, I don't know if it was in the water when we were kids in the 60s or whatever, but you know, my ability, I have the ability to really lock in on something like editing or whatever and be hyper vigilant and detailed and almost obsessed with it.
Hmm.
But I also have the ability, I have the side of me that is so distracted by all the different other things that I'm like, oh, look, I need
Exactly.
something on Amazon, or that bird just flew by, or you know, like, so I think, you know, they're probably part of this. Like a psychiatrist would probably look at us and go, oh, that's this. And
Yeah.
you need this medication.
Right. Good God. Um, one of my most prized possessions I got from you recently was a painting or a collab type thing you're doing with the cutouts and stuff, the influencer.
Yeah, yeah,
And yeah, I finally got it framed, and it's a big piece. I don't know,
it
it's
is.
probably 4 feet by 3.5 feet up on the wall, but I mean, it stands out, and I get so many compliments on it. But this is the piece. What were you thinking when you created this?
Okay, so
And talk about the technique too, because if you look at it in person, it's almost 3D because you can see the cutout stuff where you've kind of glued it on, or however your technique is.
yep. So this is done on a French paper called Arche oil paper, and if you saw it and pronounced it like in English, you would say arches,
Mhm.
ARCH, but it's called Arche. This paper's been made since I think they said 1040,
Wow.
and it's made for oil paint and oil pastels. You literally cannot destroy this paper. You could, I
Hmm.
mean, you could probably burn it, but anything you do to it, you can abuse it as an artist, and it just stands. So
It's resilient.
it's resilient. So I've got that paper, and then this was a technique that was actually literal collage, and I came across this technique. I was working on, you know, like I said, pushing the bounds of portraiture, and a photographer I know named Maxine Helfman, um, unknowingly to me, sent me a box of photographs. And anybody that knows anything about photography knows that photographers have literally thousands of images that you'll never see. You're seeing the few images that they picked to show you. So
Right.
she had this box of cast off prints where she had been experimenting with different printing techniques on different materials and just all these different, but the one thing is that she works in portraiture. So these were all portraits. This box arrived. She goes, yeah, do whatever you want with it. I just thought I thought you might enjoy these. So those sat in my studio for a couple of months. I didn't really know what to do with them, but I started pulling them out and laying them out on tables. And over time, I realized, well, what if I just started tearing these up and reassembling these into different and making different images out of them? Mm-hmm. And so, that led to this whole body of work of these collage type works. But what I began doing then, and in this case is true, instead of using her photographs, I began just making drawings and tearing the drawings up. And I would make drawings on different materials and different types of paper, and, using pencil or painting them or drawing them or using watercolors or whatever, and just make all these portraits and then tear them up, put them in a box, get this collection of hands and eyes and ears and different things. And then it was just really compelling to reassemble those into a different composition than they were ever originally made for. And in this particular case, I was in a mode where I was working on referencing classical paintings. And it's hard to see in this, but there's some gold leaf type that goes across this in a way that was done like back in the Renaissance. They did this with royalty and stuff. And my whole idea here was I was looking at Renaissance paintings and thinking, how can I tie, that time to our current time? And that's where I came up with the influencer. So, he has this Renaissance look. It's in a Renaissance style. He's got a cape, but he's also got, of course, he has his iPhone. Of course he has his followers. And,
That's great.
So yeah. I'm glad you like that piece. I really love this piece. It's just and I think there's like a certain rhythm to it too. Like, it's just not traditional. Things are like we are. They're not perfect, Mm-hmm. That's kind of the point of this, or one of the points of it anyway.
Yeah, man. When I got that, it's cool to see it just flat laid on a table. When I got it framed, and it's similar to what you're seeing here on the screen, except it's got a little black mat behind it, and it's floating. But man, it just pops. I mean, this does not do it justice.
It's got something that's going on where the colors are. I don't know if it's complementary or secondary. I forget the technical term for it, but those oranges and reds with that blue, and then the green, all of these colors. I'm probably going to get crucified for this, but the way I understand it is that colors that are across from each other on the color wheel really pop. So I think instinctually, like red and green are two colors that if you put them together, they vibrate, like visually they vibrate your eyes. So I think that's some of what's happening here. I think what's worth mentioning too is, like, as we look through these, people are going, God, these paintings don't even look like, they're in the same style, and they're not.
That is great though. That is really cool.
Yeah, I don't want to work in the same style. Yeah.
Yeah. So many people ask me, are you going to do a follow-up to Hired Gun? I was like, well, I already made that movie.
Right.
And we know how it ends, right?
Yes.
These guys are at the top of their game. Some of them get paid well, some don't, but they don't have any ownership in the band, and it's a gig employment, really.
Yeah.
So you did my Rob Halford, and then I remember you're making a series of rock stars, Mick Jagger, David Bowie, whatnot. And I was like, you should do one of Alice Cooper. And for those people that don't know, if it wasn't for Alice Cooper and listening to the album Love It to Death when 18 came across FM radio, I would probably not be in the position I'm in right now. Alice Cooper heavily influenced my music choices. And here's what you came up with. And I think it is so cool all the different dynamics in this thing. Explain this piece to me.
Yeah, so this is just another collage, and this is literally what I did. I was thinking about you when I made this piece. And what I did was I researched Alice Cooper through the years and pulled together all these different references of him. And I actually made, I think there were 7 or 8 portraits of him from different times. And then I did that same technique. I tore him up and reassembled it.
So
It's got to look like him, but I reassembled it in like a non-conventional way to portray like his complexity and depth, and then worked over it to get the color and the hair and stuff like that. And it's a process that takes it takes time, and like you mess it up, and you have to cover up things that aren't working and stuff like that. But then you land in a position where you just know, like, that's it. And I like, when I look at this, I think of that. Like, it was a process to get to this point, and I think there's a lot of painting over and a lot of different, like we were talking about earlier, working your way through problems. But when I see this, I just think it's like full of energy, full of energy and full of joy.
Yeah, man. I love Alice Cooper.
Those
really
eyes, like, I just get like, I get a lot from looking at this,
Yeah, I do too. What's funny is I got to interview him for Hired Gun. I'd never met Alice Cooper in my life. And I get a call from his manager, Shep Gordon. He goes, "Hey, can you be in Nevada tomorrow?" Reno. He can do the interview. And I'm like, holy shit.
Oh, man.
I scramble to get my crew together. We get to Reno. And I don't know if you ever got so like excited or nervous or whatnot that you had a stomach ache. Like,
yeah,
I don't know if I'm going to shit or throw up, but
yeah.
I'm getting ready to meet Alice Cooper, and his assistant called me. He goes, "Hey, we'll be up in 2 minutes, and we're getting on the elevator now." And that's when the nerves really hit. I'm jumping up and down like a little schoolgirl. I don't know what to expect. I've never met the guy before. And the knock on the door happens. I open it up, and there he is. He's got some of the black smudge under his eyes. He's tiny, man, just very, very frail looking.
Wow.
Fran, Alice, how you doing, man? What a great concept you've come up with for this documentary. And he immediately made me feel at ease, right? The bad part is sometimes they say sometimes you don't ever meet your heroes because they be assholes or whatnot, but this is not the case with him. The case for me was I was hoping to be greeted with the Alice Cooper that had a knife stuck through the baby's head, or like, right, just ripping the head off a doll or whatnot. But that's not what I got. I got this extremely pleasant human being that made me feel calm. And for those who have seen Hired Gun, you'll notice that Glenn Sobel and Nita Strauss are in the film too. Well, that's because of Alice Cooper. When we're done with our interview, which, by the way, I was only supposed to get 20 minutes with him. He gave me like an hour and a half. He goes, "Have you interviewed Nita Strauss yet? My new guitar player. We call her Hurricane Nita." I'm like, "No, tell me more." And he goes, "Da da da da. You want me to call her?" I'm like, "Sure." So he got his wife to call her, and she came up and interviewed her. And then Nita is like, "Did you talk to Glenn Sobel, our drummer, yet?" "No." "Here you go. Let's do this." I got 3 interviews out of that one trip, man. It was great. But
so generous, right? Like, he doesn't
yeah.
have to do that. He could big time you,
Oh yeah, no, he was nothing but pleasant. So you have a new series coming out, and I'm going to pop this one up and let you kind of. This is so cool, man. What is this? This Mask series?
Thank you. Yeah, Fran. So, we were talking earlier about abstract heads, and I tend to work in series like this where I'll have an idea, and if it's a really strong idea, it can, you can make a lot of paintings. I think this is the 22nd. This is mask number 22.
Wow.
Wow. So this is the newest version of that, and there's actually 4 of these that reference art. So the idea here is that I wanted to do portraits that allow you to look inside somebody's head, but in a non-traditional way. So like not a window into their head, but more of like what they're thinking or what they're hiding or what they like. What's behind this person? What's behind Fran? What's behind Greg? Like what's, you know, what's going on in there? And so I was playing around with actually with switching faces, and I was thinking, you know, what if somebody were just holding up something in front of their face that told you a different story than their face does?
Right.
You know, so I was working on that. And then what I realized after, and this happens to me constantly, is that I don't really know the meaning of what I'm making till later. And then I look at it, and often it comes from collectors and from other people, and they tell me what it means. And it's actually way better than anything I could come up with. And somebody told me one time at the beginning of this series, they're like, these are masks. You know that, right? And I was like, no, I don't. I've just had, I explained it the same way I just explained it to you. I was just trying to like get inside somebody, and I was thinking, well, it would be interesting. You know, are they holding up family photos? Or so in this case, like it's kind of reverse engineered, and I got told what these are, and this person was right. You know, these are masks. So in this series and in this particular painting, I wanted to take there's 4 of these, like I said earlier, and they're kids. And I wanted to take these kids and identify like famous artists that they connected with is kind of the idea.
So cool.
So this would be a you know, Jean-Michel Basquiat sort of mask for this kid. And then I did another one that has like the girl with the pearl earring. There's a Mona Lisa. There's the that's the girl with the pearl. So this is a kid, you know, and her inner self is that. It was really fun to paint those classics too.
Yeah.
And then I think that the 4th one's like a Rembrandt. So yeah, I just unconventional portraits, right?
I just love the detail on her shirt and that vest with all the little sequins or whatever those things are.
Crazy, right? That was not fun to paint.
No, I can imagine, man. Like that's nuts. And then finally, man, when I moved here, you know, I told you, I was like, man, I need a piece that's about 6 feet long, 3.5 feet wide, but I don't know what I want. And then we're just having this organic conversation, you know, and I don't want to call it the Last Supper, but it's kind of like, who would you, if you could have a dream dinner at a table, who would they be? And for me, it has to be something spectacular, right? People that inspired me, that bring back nostalgia from my childhood. You know, people who are relentless in their work ethic, and you know, some of my favorite people. And 2 of these people you've done paintings for me, but I'm going to go ahead and throw it up here because it's pretty mind blowing, the detail and everything. So here we go.
Yeah, this makes me smile. We worked hard on this together.
Yeah. So who I have here, and you know, nostalgia, Evil Knievel. I remember putting on wide World of Sports and watching all his jumps, the rocket, everything, man. And I just, you know, I can't tell you how many times I've almost broken bones trying to be Evil Knievel on my bicycle, jumping trash cans and grocery carts. And then, of course, we have probably my favorite era of Alice Cooper here. And if you look at the table here, I mean, the snake is, I mean, it's just remarkable. And then Rob Halford here from probably the Killing Machine era.
Yeah.
You know, with his whip. And then my favorite actor is Tom Cruise, right? Not only because of his acting and some of the stunts he does or whatnot, but his work ethic, man. You know, I've met people that have worked with him before, and it cannot be adequate. It must be on top, or he will not accept it. And it's just relentless, right? And I love that about him. And his presence on the screen is remarkable for such a, you know, I don't want to say short guy and offend him, but he's not a very tall dude. I've seen him once. You know, we mixed my second film on Ray Parker Jr. at Skywalker Ranch in Northern California, and he was mixing Top Gun Maverick there at the same time. And he came in on a helicopter and he jumps out with Jerry Bruckheimer. I'm like, holy shit. There's
Wow.
Tom Cruise and Jerry Bruckheimer, So it was a pretty cool experience. And then on the end here, number 26 is my favorite athlete of all time, Rod Woodson from the Pittsburgh Steelers. Same thing, man. The guy was just a beast, the nicest person. I've got to meet him a few times. And back behind me, you can't see it, but I got a couple jerseys signed by him to me and Zach. But just a beast, I don't think I've ever seen an athlete like him before. But talk to me about this. What medium is this? I know it's not. I remember getting it stretched. I was terrified, going into the framer and having them do it, and then making sure they got it all right. But they killed it. It's hanging in my living room. I put a museum light over it. And when it's dark and you put that museum light with this light that you have hanging, it just screams, man. It is just gorgeous.
Well, now I'm going to have to come visit.
Yeah.
This is oil on canvas. It's really simple, but the idea was that, I was watching this television show. I think I told you, and I took a picture of the screen. It's actually 2 different television shows inspired this. One, there's this like drug kingpin, and in his apartment, he had this like ultra modern apartment in the show. And in the background was this long painting of the Last Supper. And it had him and his brother painted in the center, and that had all their heroes like JFK, and it was an Irish show, so it had Phil Lynott from Thin Lizzy was in it. I guess he's one of their heroes. So they had all their heroes and them, and they were in the middle. I thought that's just a fucking cool painting, So I just took a snapshot, and I've always had that like pulled to the side for reference. Is that your doorbell?
No, that's my glucose monitor.
Oh,
yeah. I have type 2 diabetes.
That's new.
Yeah. No, it is.
Yeah. Well, anyway, Last Supper painting, and then the other image I had that I'd pulled aside. I didn't know how these would connect, and I often do that. I'm sure you do the same thing. You pull a reference from everywhere and just keep it. And someday it makes sense. And there was these mobsters sitting at a table with this hanging light, and it was all black around them, and they're sitting at this table. And I thought, well, when we talked about this piece, I thought, well, this is going to be the Last Supper, your Last Supper. But the more we talked about it, it's like, well, a better idea is, who are like 5 or 6 people, 4, 5, 6 people that you would it could be anybody in history. There are no limits to this. It's totally personal. It's all about what you would want to do.
Right.
And there are no limits to this. It could be anybody. And that's when we started riffing on this idea and coming up with it. And I can remember like the iterations we went through, and you're like, well, you got Alice Cooper in there, but I want like a more druggy Alice Cooper, like from a different time period. So we played with that, and we played with Rod Woodson and his time with the Steelers. So, this is what I was talking about at the very beginning of this conversation. We've come all the way back around. It's like, that's the thing that's the best about this, is the collaboration, and it's, on pieces like this that are commission pieces and stuff like that. And it's fun to just work together on the idea so we can get it exactly the way you want it. And I want to do a lot more of these. Like, I've already written out who it would be for myself.
Who's that?
I don't have the list in front of me, but I do remember like in the center is going to be my grandfather.
Oh, okay.
But I was like debating between like David Lynch and Stanley Kubrick, and David Bowie's definitely in there. And, Andy Warhol's definitely going to be sitting there because he was just a big influence on me early on. So it's people like that. Francis Bacon, the painter.
Yeah.
Is in there. But there were a few like on the film side of things. I'm just, I'm a huge film buff. It's David Lynch or Stanley Kubrick. So I have to figure out, maybe I'll just put them both in there and we extend the table,
Right. Exactly.
That's the beauty of this, is that, you know, I want to do more of these. This is the first one and the only one I've done, but like I said, I want to do more, and I want to collaborate with people on making these, and they can be any size. They don't have to be 6 feet long. They can be, you know,
Right.
they can be miniature, they can be drawings, they can be paintings, but the point is that to make it 100% you. There's no judgment in this painting whatsoever as to who you choose. Some people go, well, that's an odd choice. Well, no, it's not, because it's what you want, and it's what means something to you. And that's beautiful.
Yeah.
You know?
I had the best time collaborating with you on this. I remember, like, we had different people at different ends of the town. I was like, well, let's put Alice and Rob next together. Then,
Yeah.
you know, Rod and Evil on that side, then
Yep.
Tom Cruise over there, and, you know, some of the spacing or whatnot. But I'm looking at these, like the Terrible Towel, man. I mean, that is an identical replication of the Terrible Towel. The colors, you know, the font that they use and everything else. How, like, do you just experiment with that on the side?
You know, it's pulling a reference, and then some of it is I'm using AI. Like, I'm not a fan of AI in general, but I'm warming to the idea, because like when you need a hand, like Evil Knievel's hand on the top of a, you know,
The
he had
cane.
this staff, this cane that he used. You know, it's really helpful for that. In the case of the Terrible Towel, I think I found one that was flat, and I just imagined how it would look bent over and just kind of painted it, but bent over the edge of the table. But do you remember when we were working on this, man? Originally, we had, because the original photo for this, from those mobsters, they were having a feast.
Yes.
So we had like wine and
Grapes
and food, and it was like, yeah, it was like, and then you were like, man, I don't know, like, what are some other foods? Like, I don't drink, so let's not put alcohol in there. And I was like, okay. And we were like playing with like different things. It just wasn't resonating right. You were like, what if it could be stuff that was related to them?
right.
And I think the only example you gave me is like Rob would have a whip.
Right.
And then I kind of went from there and thought, well, what would Alice have? So for each of them, other than Tom Cruise, we came up, you know, we developed something, and I ran it by, and you're like, yeah, you nailed it. That's it. Yeah.
Yeah. And, you know, and you walked me through the whole process and kept me informed. It took a little while because, like you said, it's oil and it's got to dry and everything else. And you can even roll it up and fold it for almost a month, I think.
Right. Yeah. It takes about a month to fully dry. Yeah.
Yeah. And for anybody watching this, so you're here to tell the viewers here that any size, basically,
Yeah.
no judgment. You're open for business to take on new clients and commissions.
Yeah. 100%. Just, you can reach out to me through my website, but I'd love to collaborate more on these. They're just so fulfilling. And I think they are for the collectors too. Like you're saying, it's just a good experience all around to collaborate and really dial in on something that's so personal to somebody.
Right.
And so quirky, right? I mean, it's so fascinating to see what people choose. To me, you know, your choices. There's nobody else on this earth that's going to put those 5 people together.
No.
You know, it's fabulous. I mean, it's just so interesting to me. And I think that's like part of what portraiture is. It's just like, you know, it's just people are so interesting.
Yeah.
And
I'm looking at the detail too with the overhanging light and the shadows. I mean, they're cast perfectly, you know?
yeah, that's another thing that I think, because of my commercial experience in the advertising and photography world, is that I don't fully understand what you do with the camera 100%, but I do understand light.
Right.
And I have a lot of experience directing photographers with light. So I understand how it hits a subject from a source. And I think it's a really important and powerful tool in painting and in photography, is light, you know? And so I'm very, very sensitive to that. So yeah, it's a very specific thing. That lighting was not that way in the subjects. We added that, and we painted that in.
It's funny you say about light because, you know, in painting, I'm sure it's a lot different, but in photography, especially with shooting film, you know, with digital, you can crank that ISO up to 1,000,000 almost and just strike a match and get the whole frame in lit beautifully. But shooting film, a lot more challenging. And I've been shooting digital since clients have been begging for it for the past 15, 16 years.
Yeah.
And I recently picked up the Nikon F5, which is a full, you know, film camera. And I didn't really get to practice with it much before I went to my first shoot. I wanted to go shoot Creed, and it was a disaster. Like everything was fuzzy except for maybe 5 or 6 pictures,
Whoa.
maybe 10. Yeah, it was just a nightmare because I haven't fiddled with one for so long. And I was like, okay, you know, what did I do wrong? And I remember my settings I had. I'm like, let me adjust this. And then I went to New York last week to visit my son. And while I was there, a couple of friends of mine's bands were playing at Madison Square Garden, Disturbed and Seven Dust. Now, Seven Dust was not the headliner, so they didn't even get the big full light show.
Okay.
But I knew internally where I needed to kind of meter it, right, to get something. And they almost all came out really, really well, you know. And we're shooting on film, those are dollars every frame you click, you know.
Yeah.
It's not like just delete, delete, delete. You know, you got 36 times to try to get a great image. And then when Disturbed came out, full light show, pyro, fireworks, night and day. You know what I mean? Because there was a lot of light, gave me a lot more latitude to do what I needed to do. And I'm excited about it. You know, it's a new beginning for me.
Are you, it's amazing. Are you, when you say you're metering the light, you're not adding light
No,
to the situation. You're dealing with the light. God, man, that's really complex.
it is. And I'm shooting on 400 speed film.
Yeah.
You know, and I used to shoot on 800, but then you can get a little overblown if the light, you know, it's difficult, man. There's definitely an art form to it. So
Yeah, definitely.
yeah. So I want to do some this or that questions with you.
Okay.
Yep. Painting or drawing?
Painting.
Okay. Abstract or realism?
I have to say this or that, or can I say combo of both?
Well, you do both really well, but what do you prefer to do?
I guess I lean towards, in my mind, I lean towards abstract. So I'd say
Yeah.
abstract.
Right. And I haven't seen you do this yet, but digital art or traditional?
Traditional.
Yeah. What is your take on digital art? Is that really art? Like super creative, deep thinking
It
art?
can be.
Yeah.
It definitely can be. And there are a lot of cases where it's not. I think when we got into the NFTs and stuff, you got to see how really bad it can be.
Yeah.
Um,
Sure.
that's what's tough about art, man. And I mean, film falls into this, music falls into this, everything. It's just, it's so abstract in so many ways because it just depends on who's listening to it and who's assigning value to it. Because in some ways, you and I are like really big fans of like technical mastery, right? Like we appreciate, but then something comes along that's maybe not that great technically, but you just love it anyways,
Right.
right? And it's like, you know, like I wouldn't say, like, you're gonna kill me for saying this, but like I wouldn't say Judas Priest's first album has masterful techniques on the guitar, or the musicianship is anything like in the realm of like technical mastery, or like
Right.
Black Sabbath is the same way.
Mm-hmm.
But there's just something about, like, you could say Led Zeppelin is technical mastery. Those musicians were as good as it gets.
Right.
The other two examples I left probably fall short of that technically, but they're just as powerful, right?
Absolutely.
So
Absolutely.
in art, it's kind of the same way. So when you talk about digital art, it's like, well, what it's the tools in the hand of the artist and what they do with it. And there's some incredible digital art in this world that it would just blow your mind, you know.
Right. Right.
Um,
Monochrome or full color?
full color.
Okay. Sketchbook or canvas?
Canvas. I'm not a sketchbook guy.
Yeah. Okay. Okay, here we go. Oils or acrylics?
Definitely oils. No question.
Really? Okay. Street art or gallery art?
I'm a gallery guy. I'm not a street art guy.
Same. I mean, you see the best of the best in the galleries, they'll come find them. Creating in silence or with music?
Definitely music.
Yeah. I was going to ask, when you're doing the Alice and the Rob Halford one, were you listening to each of those artists?
Hell yeah, I was, of course.
That's awesome.
It's a really interesting thing because nothing can take a painting practice down like a podcast. If you put a freaking podcast on in the room, it just takes the whole energy of my day down.
Yeah.
If I'm having to like really knuckle down and like that shirt with all the sequins, I can listen to a podcast. But if I'm painting and creating and working on several things, I've got to have something with some energy to keep me moving. This is a crazy little stat, but I think I showed you this. Tell me if I didn't, but you know the stupid Spotify thing at the end of the year? They tell you your year in review. You listen to this artist and most. Apparently, I was in their top 8% of listening hours. I listened to 39,000 minutes of music last year in the studio.
Christ, dude.
So I listened to a lot of music.
Wow. Creating in the morning or the night?
Morning for me.
Is it? See, for me, I get so distracted with phone calls, emails, the dog, the this, the that.
Yeah.
If I'm working at home, if I'm in an office situation, it's different. But to me, I can edit from 7 p.m. till 2 or 3 in the morning, and I'm just locked in. I've got nobody bothering me, and it just.
I think I could do that, but you mentioned earlier the traffic in LA.
Oh God.
I have to leave, like there's a certain window that I need to leave in, and then there's a certain window for me to come home where the traffic is manageable. And if I miss those windows, I'm fucked.
Game over.
And that to go to the studio out of Santa Monica in the morning, I need to leave by a certain time, and then I need to leave the studio to get back home. Otherwise I'm screwed. So I'm limited by that. It wouldn't surprise me if I had free. If those factors weren't involved, I probably would be in there at night.
Right. A studio filled with natural light or artificial light?
A lot of painters would say natural light, but I've discovered that those windows need to be positioned correctly. So I would go with artificial at this point.
Okay. Detailed planning before starting a piece, or just a spontaneous creation?
Definitely spontaneous.
Oh, okay. That's cool. Solo exhibitions or grouping shows?
Definitely solo.
Yeah. All the attention's on you.
Totally. And I mean, group shows can be a real mess.
Yeah.
If not curated properly.
Yeah. Exploring new mediums or refining what you already know?
New mediums.
Yeah. Okay. Let's see. Smooth blending or bold, visible strokes?
Visible, bold strokes.
Interesting. Classical art or contemporary art?
I'm a contemporary guy, but
yeah,
I like both.
Yeah, I can appreciate the classical stuff too. I saw some stuff in some museums in New York last week that were like,
right,
what am I looking at here?
Totally. Yeah, man. I like when the two meet, actually, when the modern's brought to the classic. I think that's true in music too, and in film. Like what was that Demi Moore film that just what was it?
Or She's a Monster or whatever.
Yeah, there's so many like tie-ins to old movies, and that like it's incredible.
Yeah,
incredible how many movies and scenes are referenced.
I haven't seen it yet. I'm gonna have to sit down and watch
film.
Selling originals or selling prints?
Originals.
Yeah. I love my originals I have from you.
It's
Like,
just different. It's a different customer too.
yeah. Portraits or abstract figures?
Portraits.
Okay. Creating for personal expression or creating for an audience?
Personal.
Very good. Painting with brushes or using unconventional tools?
I like brushes.
Yeah. Have you ever used unconventional tools? Let's say, like, here's a piece of stone or a rock that I'm just going to smear on this canvas or whatnot.
Yeah, I'm doing some work right now that's combines abstract and more traditional portraiture, and I'm not limiting myself to just brushes. I've actually been using a razor blade, a flat edge razor blade, to scrape off the layers I'm creating, so you can see down below you can see the layers. And yeah, there's several other like widgets. You could go to the art store and find all kinds of things to paint with, but there's these kind of block wedges, things that you can scrape with. I'm using those and palette knives and stuff, and it's just really gratifying.
That is so cool.
Yeah,
Framed artwork or unframed canvas?
I like an unframed canvas.
Yeah.
Something
My big piece. Yeah. The big piece you made for me, the dinner table one is unframed.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like I said, that was nerve wracking getting stretched.
Yeah, the canvas wraps around the edges. It just has it makes it feel important, I think.
It does. Color theory or intuitive color choices?
Intuitive for sure, 100%.
Okay. Matte finish or glossy finish?
Matte, 100%.
Same.
Can't
Nothing like
stand
it.
glossy.
Constructive criticism or total creative freedom?
Total creative freedom is thorny. I think some criticism is good. I'll go with criticism.
Yeah. I take the criticism really well. Like if somebody comes to me and is like, that you need to cut that one scene down by 6 frames. And I'm like, is that really going to make a difference? And I'm sure it's the same thing with color choices or like,
Yeah.
the eye color is not sinking.
Whatever it is. Yeah, it
Yeah.
could be anything. Yeah, I always like at first bristle at it, and then I walk away and think, what if they're right?
Yeah.
And I will 100% of the time try it.
Yeah.
I may not you may not take those 6 frames out, but you're going to go look at it and see, did it do what? Oh, wow, they're right.
Yeah. And a lot of times they won't even know if you did it or not. Okay, I did it. Oh, much better. Right.
It's so true. That's true in commercial work, especially.
Yeah.
It's like they just want to make you do something.
Yeah. Last one. Art as a personal journey or art as a message to the world?
Personal journey, 100%. I'm not into messages or assigning meaning to things. Like I said, often the meaning in my work comes out later. It's almost like making a movie in reverse, it's strange. I'm not into telling people what they need to think. I made a painting one time that was I won't make this long, but I made a painting one time and I put it out on Instagram, and one of the comments from somebody was like 2 paragraphs about how this painting spoke to them and how it was ultimately the Wizard of Oz.
Oh,
And I was just like blown away by this. And I just kept that explanation for the painting because it was so much better than what I had in mind.
right.
And I think that's the beauty of all of this. I'm really like zeroed in on not telling people what to think about my work.
Right.
But letting them
Yeah.
come to the conclusion themselves,
Yeah. Something that just popped into my head. I'm going to pull this image back up. One of these, your masks. What if a client came to you? Let's just say I came to you and I was like, Gregory, I want you to make one of these of me. Use my shape of my head, my shoulders, my torso, but I want you to do the masking of my personality, my mojo, my vibe, and you did like a 1 hour Zoom with the client just to kind of get who they are, a little bit of their backstory, what they've been through, how challenging and cool would that be?
I think it would be fabulous, and I'm actually working on that very idea. I'm going to release it later this year. There's going to be a commissions portrait or portrait commission portion part to my website, to my shop, and the 5 people for dinner thing is going to be in there, but also what you're talking about, you're dead on with that. Like, I think there's something to mass commission portraits, because once I interview you, it might be as simple as a picture of your dad over your face. It could be that. That might come out of our conversation, or it could be something completely abstract.
Right.
Or it could be a combination of things. And I think that gets to the essence of really what I'm about, is that it's like we talked about earlier. It's that collaboration, but it's also getting to know you and then delivering something that profoundly affects you on a really deep level, but it also brings this joy and energy to your walls. Because that's why I collect, you know.
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
Same. Yeah.
you know, I mean, I'm sitting here in my partner's office, and I can tell you that these things behind here, she's really into the chili peppers. These things on her wall, if I showed you the other wall, she's got Dave Grohl and Taylor Hawkins.
Yeah.
She's French, so she loves this band called Telephone. She's got an old concert poster, and then she's got a portrait I did of Flea up
Oh,
there.
cool.
These are things that bring joy and energy to her life. I'm like, this is what it's about for me. It's not about imposing a message or a agenda or a message to the world or anything. This is a personal thing, and I think when we do a commission together, like, it's that push and pull, but ultimately it delivers for both of us.
Mm-hmm.
You know?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, everything I've gotten from you, I'm in love with, and they couldn't pry it out of my hands, you know. Same like in my office where I work, I've got stuff that inspires me too. Like my favorite photographer is Niels Lozauer, and he was also a mentor to me early in my career. And he's taken, you know, all the Van Halen stuff, like early stuff, and he's got some great photos of Priest, and he gifted me a print of a 16 by 20 of Rob Halford during the 1984, so it'd probably be the Defenders of the Faith tour. But it's sitting right next to me, so I can just look at it and be like, okay, I got this, you know.
Yeah, I mean, there's so much power in that, right?
There is. I mean, I don't think a lot of people understand that, but man, if you got something that brings you joy and you can stare at it and get inspired by it, totally worth every dime you spend on it.
And you know, there's science behind that. There's this book that just came out. I picked it up off of Amazon, and it's about the science of art and why we react the way we do to. So it's not only intuitive and all of that. There is real science behind it. Something is happening in our brains and in our chemistry that causes us to react that way, and it's unique to art, but all types of art. You know, dancing, film, music. There's chemical things happening through our senses that affect us in different ways. So I think it's, you know, the point you're making is yeah, most people don't realize how this can enrich their lives. But once they do, then it's kind of addicting. You're like,
it is,
and you want more. Yeah,
I know. I was like, I don't have any more fucking room on my walls for art.
Seriously,
I want more. Either. You know, it's like, what am I going to do? You like change it out every year, maybe, or
yeah, you can rotate it in and out. I think that's what major collectors do, but yeah, I have the same problem. I just have no more room.
I have zero room,
You
None.
filled that. You got a big house now. You already filled it.
Yeah, I have a piece also from Risk Rock, who is a
Yeah.
famous graffiti artist,
Yep.
and he did a limited piece. I have number 5 of 20, I think,
It's
is
that
really
hard
cool.
one, right? It's
Yeah,
amazing. What a
I have
piece.
that. I have one from, I don't know what kind of piece it is, but it's from Lee Oscar from the band War. I interviewed him for another documentary I'm doing called In the Reeds. And I went up to his place in Washington State and stayed with him for a few days while we're doing these interviews. And he started painting, right? And he gifted me the painting. He's like, "Here, I want you to take this home with you." I'm like, "Can I
Wow.
give you something for it?" "No, it's a gift. Take it." So it's hanging up too.
Amazing.
Yeah, I've probably got some other stuff around here that I'm forgetting about, but other photographs, from Waring Abbott, who did all the early beginning of Kiss. He gave me some prints. Just incredible stuff, man. Well, look, it was awesome having you on. I miss you guys so much. And your website is scrolling across the bottom here, and they can see all your wonderful art. And there's some really cool pieces up there for sale. If you want a commission, I'm sure they can reach you through this website, right?
Yep. Just go to the website and shoot me an email, and we will have a conversation. I think that's how it starts. This isn't a cookie cutter product. It's not a widget or something you can buy off of Amazon. This is it's a process, and it's collaborative. So it requires contact. So yeah, just go to my website and shoot me an email, and let's talk. Let's have a conversation. I miss you too, man. But we've done a good job keeping in touch, I think, and I'm excited. I'm excited for your podcast. I'm also excited to see what you do next in film.
Yeah, a lot of stuff coming up. Right now the industry is kind of in a weird place, but I think it's going to turn around soon.
You're a talented dude. You're going to come out on top, man.
Thank you. Likewise.
Thank you.
Thanks for coming on, Greg.
All right, bro.
See ya.
See ya.